Calvin Dorsey was packing boxes in his empty living room. He was 54 years old and finally moving out of his house in Arlington, Texas. He had lived there for 12 years, but he was tired of his mean neighbor, Martha Kellerman. She always complained about everything: his grass, his trash cans, and even when his family visited, Martha worked for the HOA, which is like a group that makes rules for the neighborhood. She acted like she was the boss of everyone. When she saw the big moving truck in Calvin's driveway that morning, she didn't think, "Oh, Calvin is moving." Instead, she thought, "This looks wrong to me." Calvin was carrying boxes to the truck when Martha walked over in her fancy clothes with the HOA shirt. She said loudly, "Mr. Dorsey, this moving truck is not allowed. You didn't ask permission from the HOA." Calvin put down his box and said, "Martha, I'm moving out. I don't think I need to ask anyone." But Martha wouldn't listen. She crossed her arms and said, "Big trucks need permission. I don't even know if this truck should be here. You need to prove you own this house." Calvin couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You've been my neighbor for 10 years. You know I live here. You've sent me complaint letters." Martha got her phone out and said, "If you can't show me papers right now, I'm calling the police." Calvin felt embarrassed because other neighbors were starting to watch. He said, "Martha, please don't do this." But Martha called the police anyway. She said into her phone, "Hello, I want to report something suspicious. There's a man putting things in a truck, and I don't think he lives here." Calvin felt so frustrated. After 12 years of trying to be a good neighbor, Martha was treating him like a criminal on his last day. The neighbors started coming outside to watch. Some took out their phones to record. A teenager named Ryan said, "Miss Kellerman, Ives there. Everyone knows it." But Martha yelled at Ryan, "Mind your own business." An older neighbor named Gerald came out and said, "Martha, I've moved twice from this street and never needed permission for a truck. You're making a big scene." Martha got even angrier. She said, "Gerald, stay out of this. You don't understand." Calvin shook his head and said, "The truth is right here, Martha. You just don't want to see it." Then a car pulled up, and Calvin's son Preston got out. He was wearing a police uniform because he was a real police officer. Preston said, "Hey, Dad, need help moving?" Calvin smiled a little and said, "You picked the perfect time to show up." Martha stared at Preston's uniform and badge. She said suspiciously, "And who are you supposed to be?" Preston was polite and said, "I'm Officer Preston Dorsey with the city police. I'm here to help my father move." The neighbors gasped. Ryan whispered, "Oh, man, this just got interesting." But Martha didn't believe it. She said, "Nice costume, but I don't buy it. Anyone can order a uniform online." Calvin got upset and said, "Martha, this is my son. You've seen him around here for years." Martha got louder so everyone could hear. She said, "How convenient! You get caught doing something wrong, and suddenly your son shows up pretending to be a cop." Preston stayed calm. He'd dealt with angry people before as a police officer. He said, "Ma'am, I'm not pretending. Here's my badge and my ID. You can call the police station to check." He showed her his shiny badge and official ID card. Martha looked at it but still didn't believe him. She said, "I can tell this is fake. You can wave that around all day, but you're not fooling me." Calvin laughed, but not in a happy way. He said, "That fake cop is my son who risks his life every day to protect this city. He's earned more respect in 5 years than you have by yelling at everyone." Preston tried to calm things down. He said, "Dad, let me handle this." Then he turned to Martha and said, "Ma'am, I'm just here to help my father. The police you called will be here soon, and they'll prove I'm telling the truth." But Martha was determined to cause trouble. She said, "You can show me all the fake metal you want, but I'm treating both of you like you don't belong here." Preston's voice got mad, or serious. He said, "You're making a mistake. When the real officers get here, they'll see it too." The whole street was watching now. People were recording with their phones. Martha stood in front of the moving truck with her arms out wide like she was trying to stop it from leaving. She yelled, "This truck is not going anywhere. Not today. Calvin begged her. "Martha, stop this before it gets worse. Just let me move and leave with some dignity." But Martha's eyes were angry. She said, "Dignity? After all the trouble you've caused over the years? Not while I'm here. I'll make sure everyone sees what you really are." Calvin felt hurt by her mean words. He looked at Preston and said quietly, "Unbelievable. Just unbelievable." Preston had been patient, but Martha was pushing too far. He said firmly, "Ma'am, you're making this worse than it needs to be. This is your last chance to step back." But Martha shook her head and said, "We'll see what the real officers think when they get here." She planted herself right in front of the truck so it couldn't move. Martha said, "I'm not moving until the police come." Preston knew he had to act like a police officer now. He said, "Ma'am, step aside. You are blocking private property and interfering with my father's right to move his things." Martha laughed in a mean way and said, "You're both trespassing, and you're pretending to be a cop." Preston showed his badge to everyone again. He said, "This badge number is 4782. My name is Officer Preston Dorsey. You can call the police station right now to check." Gerald, the older neighbor, looked at the badge and said, "That looks real to me." But Martha crossed her arms tighter and said, "Fake IDs are everywhere. Anyone with a printer can make one." Preston was getting tired of being patient. He said clearly, "Ma'am, I am a real police officer. You are interfering with my father's legal move. If you don't step aside and stop blocking this driveway, I'll have to arrest you." Martha stepped closer to him and yelled, "Force me! What are you going to do? Arrest me!" Preston didn't back down. He said, "If I have to, yes." Everyone gasped. Calvin's heart was beating fast. He said, "Son, do what you need to do. I'm tired of this CI. Circus." Martha laughed like she was crazy and said, "Ha! Arrest me for standing on my own street? You wouldn't dare." Preston said calmly, "Don't test me, ma'am." Martha looked around at all the neighbors for support, but people were shaking their heads at her. Gerald said, "You've lost it, Martha." Feeling desperate, Martha stepped back in front of the truck and spread her arms even wider. She yelled, "This truck is not moving until the real police get here." Preston took a deep breath. He said, "Ma'am, this is your last warning." Martha's face was red with anger. She pointed at him and said, "You are a fake, and I'm not moving. Do what you have to do." With those words, Martha had gone too far. Preston had to act like the police officer he really was. Preston said firmly, "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle. This is not up for discussion." But Martha screamed, "No! You think you can scare me? This truck is staying right here." Ryan, still filming, whispered, "She's about to get arrested. I can feel it." Calvin said tiredly, "Martha, enough is enough. This is my property. This is my son. You're embarrassing yourself." But Martha looked around wildly and said, "Don't you see? They're ganging up on me. He's not a real cop, and he's trying to bully me." Gerald stepped forward again and said, "Martha, for crying out loud. The man is in uniform. He showed you his badge number. You're the only one who thinks this is fake." Preston's patience was almost gone. He took a step forward and said with authority, "Ma'am, you're interfering with a legal move, blocking private property, and accusing a police officer of lying without any reason. I won't repeat myself again." Martha's hands were shaking, but she yelled even louder, "You think your little badge makes you special? You think you can just wave it around and make me disappear? Well, I know my rights." Preston said seriously, "And I know the law. Step aside." Instead of moving, Martha slapped her hand on the truck's hood and screamed, "This truck isn't going anywhere! Do you hear me? Not 1 inch!" Everyone gasped. Ryan almost dropped his phone and whispered, "Oh man, she really did that." Calvin stepped forward angrily and said, "Martha, you've crossed the line. Get your hands off my truck." But Martha pressed harder against the hood and said, "Make me!" The neighbors looked shocked. Some shook their heads. Others looked embarrassed for her. A woman whispered, "This is out of control." Preston gave one final warning. His voice was sharp and serious. "Ma'am, remove yourself from this vehicle right now, or I will arrest you." Martha laughed in a crazy way and said, "Arrest me! You wouldn't dare!" Preston didn't blink. He said, "Try me." Everyone got quiet. Even the birds seemed to stop chirping. Martha stared at Preston, waiting for him to back down. But he didn't quote T.still comma. She refused. She said, "No, you can't arrest me. I'm the one protecting this neighborhood." Preston said, "Protecting it from what? A man moving out of his own house?" Her words got mixed up, but she pressed her hand harder on the truck hood like it would keep her safe. She said, "From people who don't respect the rules." Calvin stepped closer and said with a tired voice, "The only person disrespecting anyone here is you, Martha." The crowd gasped when Calvin said that. A woman covered her mouth, and Gerald muttered, "That's it. She's gone too far." Preston's face got serious. His voice cut through the air like a knife. "Ma'am, you are officially under arrest for blocking property." The words hung in the air like thunder. Everyone leaned forward. Phones went up higher. Calvin felt his heart beating in his throat. Preston moved slowly and carefully. He said clearly, "Ma'am, put your hands behind your back." Martha jumped back like his touch would burn her. She yelled, "Don't you dare! You can't arrest me! I live here! I run this block!" Preston said, still controlled but firmer, "Ma'am, stop fighting me. You are interfering with private property and not following lawful commands. Put your hands behind your back." The neighbors whispered to each other. Gerald shook his head and said, "She's doing this to herself." Ryan zoomed in with his phone and whispered, "Oh, this is going viral tonight." Martha pressed both hands flat on the truck hood like she was glued to it. She yelled, "You're not taking me anywhere! Everyone here knows this is harassment!" Calvin stepped closer and said desperately, "Martha, stop this! Don't make it worse for yourself! He's giving you a way out! Take it!" Her head spun toward him with wild eyes. She said, "Stay out of this, Calvin! You think you've won? You think you're going to drive away laughing? No, not while I'm still standing here." Preston let out a long breath. He knew where this was going. He'd seen it before. People so wrapped up in being right that giving up felt impossible. He said louder, like he was talking to anyone at his job, "Ma'am, you are under arrest. Final warning. Hands behind your back." But instead of listening, Martha did something that shocked everyone. She pushed Preston's hand away. The force made the badge on his chest shake a little dot. Everyone gasped loudly. Calvin's stomach dropped. He said, "Oh no!" Preston's police training took over. His voice snapped like a command. "Stop fighting me!" He grabbed her wrist and spun her gently but firmly away from the truck dot. She twisted and flailed wildly. She screamed, "Help me! He's attacking me!" Her eyes looked around wildly at the neighbor's dot. But the crowd didn't move. Phones synced. "Aid up." One woman said quietly, "She lost it. Nobody's helping her now." Preston secured one wrist in a handcuff with a quick motion. Martha fought like crazy, kicking back at him. She yelled, "Get off me! I'm not going anywhere!" Calvin's voice cracked as he called out, "Preston, be careful!" Preston replied quickly, "I got it, Dad." He kept his movements controlled and professional. He held Martha's free arm and guided it behind her back, despite her screaming, "Stop fighting! You're under arrest!" The metallic click of the second handcuff closing rang louder than any shout. The crowd let out their breath like they had all been holding it. Martha froze for half a second, then exploded with anger. She yelled, "You can't do this! I'll sue! I'll have your badge! Do you hear me?" "Ooh." Preston guided her gently but firmly away from the truck. He spoke calmly despite her screaming. "Ma'am, you are under arrest for blocking property and fighting with police. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you." Her voice cracked into a high scream. "You think you've embarrassed me? You think this makes you a hero? Just wait. Everyone will know you're a fake." But even as she yelled, the crowd's silence said everything. Neighbors shook their heads. Some looked away, embarrassed. Others whispered, "About time." Calvin leaned against the truck. His body was shaking with anger and tiredness. Watching Martha in handcuffs should have felt like winning, but instead, it left him feeling empty. He said quietly, "All this just for moving out." Ryan lowered his phone for a moment and whispered to his mother, "This is insane. I can't believe I just filmed this." Martha kicked at the ground as Preston held her steady, guiding her toward the sidewalk. She screamed as loud as she could, "I'm the victim! I'm the one protecting this neighborhood!" But no one clapped. No one defended her. The only sound was a siren getting louder in the distance. The real police responding to the call Martha herself had made. Preston looked back at his father. His face was calm but tired. Calvin gave him the smallest nod, silently telling him he did the right thing. But as the police car turned the corner, the show wasn't over yet. The officers inside would have to decide what to do with one of their own officers standing over a handcuffed neighbor. The siren got louder until a police car came around the corner with flashing lights. The car stopped, and two officers got out. Officer Ramirez, who was tall, and Officer Klein, who was younger, but looked sharp and alert. They looked at the scene. Preston in his full uniform, Martha with handcuffs. With a crowd of neighbors filming everything, Officer Ramirez looked confused. He said, "Preston, what's going on here?" Preston stood up straight and spoke like he was at work. "Good morning. I came as a regular person to help my father move. This woman kept interfering, blocked his truck, and after I gave her many warnings, she fought back and hit my hand. She's under arrest for blocking property and fighting with police." Martha screamed, cutting him off. "Don't listen to him! He's lying! He's not a real officer! He's pretending to be one! Look at him! He just grabbed me in front of everyone!" Officer Klein looked at Officer Ramirez, then at the crowd. Gerald stepped forward right away and said, "She's lying! We all saw it! He showed her his badge, his ID, everything. She wouldn't accept it. She blocked the truck, hit his hand when he tried to move her, and he arrested her by the book." Ryan held up his phone high and said, "I got it all on video if you need proof." Officer Ramirez sighed and rubbed his forehead. He looked at Preston and said, "You know this is messy. The way it looks, the fact it's your own neighbor." Preston nodded seriously. "I gave her every chance to walk away." Martha stomped her foot, making the handcuffs rattle. She yelled, "I demand you arrest him right now. He's a fake and this is harassment. I'm filing charges." Officer Klein crossed his arms and said, "Ma'am, you are the one in handcuffs. And from what I'm seeing and hearing, those charges won't work out the way you think they will." Her face twisted with anger and desperation. She said, No, you don't understand. I'm protecting this neighborhood. I'm the only one who cares about the rules." From the sidewalk, someone said quietly, "You care about control, not rules." Another person added, "This was bound to happen." Calvin, who had stayed quiet until now, finally stepped forward. His voice was tired but firm. He said, "Officers, I've lived here for 12 years. I paid my fees, kept my lawn nice, never caused problems, except for this woman who's treated me like a criminal since day one. Today she called the police on me for moving out of my own house. And when my son showed up to help, she accused him of pretending to be a police officer." He looked right at Martha with heavy eyes. All because she couldn't stand losing control. The silence after that was heavy, broken only by Martha's loud breathing. Officer Ramirez turned to Officer Klein, then back to Preston. He said, "We'll take it from here. We'll write the report, look at the recordings, and file the paperwork. But from what I'm seeing, what you did was right." Preston nodded and carefully handed Martha over. Officer Klein guided her toward the police car, but she fought every step. She yelled, "This isn't OV. I'll sue the HOA, I'll sue the city, I'll sue every single one of you. Do you hear me? The neighbors barely reacted. Phones stayed up, but their faces showed they were tired and disgusted. Ryan shook his head and said, "Lady, you're already internet famous. Good luck with that lawsuit." As Martha was put in the back of the police car, her yells got quieter behind the closed door. The street seemed to relax. People started talking in low voices. Gerald walked over to Calvin and Preston. He said, "That was ugly, but you both handled it well. I hope this is the last headache she gives you." Calvin managed a tired smile and said, "It's my last day here, Gerald. She won't be my problem anymore." Preston put a hand on his father's shoulder and said, "I'm sorry you had to go through this today. You deserved a quiet move, not a big show." Calvin shook his head slowly. "Don't apologize. You stood up when it mattered. You showed her and everyone else what real authority looks like." For a brief moment, father and son stood quietly in the driveway. The weight of the past few hours was heavy between them. The flashing lights reflected off the truck and off the faces of neighbors who would replay this scene for weeks. But as the police car pulled away with Martha still yelling in the back, Calvin realized this wasn't just the end of a bad day. It was the end of a long fight and the beginning of something better. The flashing lights faded as the police car turned the corner. Martha's muffled yells went with it. The neighbors began walking back to their homes. Some shook their heads, others whispered to each other, but all of them were still buzzing from what they'd just seen. Phones were already out, clips being sent to group chats, ready to go on social media before Calvin even had the chance to close the back of his moving truck. Calvin leaned against the truck bumper, breathing hard. He wiped sweat from his forehead and stared at the empty house behind him. For 12 years, that house had been his safe place, but also his battlefield. Every complaint letter taped to his door, every fine from the HOA, every disapproving look from Martha had slowly taken away his peace of mind. And now, on his last day, it had exploded into something he never thought he'd see. His own son in full uniform, putting handcuffs on the very person who had made his life miserable. Preston came over quietly. His voice was soft. "You okay, Dad?" Calvin chuckled, but it was a tired, broken kind of laugh. "I thought moving out would feel like closing a chapter. Instead, it feels like I just read the ending of a book I never wanted to open in the first place." Preston rested a hand on his father's shoulder. "Sometimes the ending's messy, but you're walking away free. That's what matters." Calvin studied his son, taking in the steady way he carried himself. Pride swelled in his chest. "You did good today, Preston. You kept your cool when I couldn't. You showed her what real authority looks like. You didn't let her drag you down to her level." Preston gave a small smile. "It's what I'm trained to do. Doesn't make it easy, especially not when it's your dad in the middle of it." Gerald, the older neighbor, walked over. He spoke quietly so the rest of the crowd wouldn't hear. "For what it's worth, Calvin, I'm sorry it ended like this. She went too far. Most of us saw it for years, but we stayed quiet. Maybe we shouldn't have." Calvin met his eyes and nodded slowly. "Silence can hurt just as much as words, Gerald. But you spoke up today. That means something." Gerald gave a short nod and headed back to his porch, leaving Calvin and Preston alone by the truck. The silence between them lingered, filled with unspoken memories. Calvin thought about the first day he'd moved into the house, Martha's tight smile as she handed him a welcome packet filled with restrictions. He thought about the countless letters. "Your grass is too high. Your trash bins are out too long. Your guests stayed too late." All of it leading to today. And yet, watching the police car disappear, Calvin realized something. Martha had been stripped of the one thing she valued most: her power, her voice, her control. Her grip on the neighborhood had collapsed in front of the very people she sought to influence. Preston broke the silence. This video is going to spread. You know that, right? By tonight, people across the city, maybe even the country, will see it. Calvin sighed. Let them. Maybe it'll make folks think twice before treating their neighbors like suspects instead of people. The truck's engine hummed quietly as Calvin climbed into the driver's seat. He looked back at the house one last time, his eyes tracing the windows, the door, the porch where he'd sat with his son on summer nights. He felt no nostalgia, only relief. You ready? Preston asked, standing by the passenger side. Calvin nodded. More than ready. They pulled away slowly. Neighbors watched as the moving truck rolled down Sycamore Drive for the last time. Some waved, others just watched. The house grew smaller in the rearview mirror until it was gone. Calvin let out a long breath, his shoulders easing for the first time that day. Funny thing, Preston. You spend years fighting little battles, and then on the day you're supposed to leave it behind, the biggest fight of all comes knocking. Preston smirked slightly. At least this time the fight ended the way it should, Calvin nodded, his eyes fixed on the open road ahead. Yeah, sometimes standing your ground doesn't mean shouting louder. Sometimes it means keeping your dignity when someone tries to strip it from you. For the first time in years, Calvin felt free. He knew the story would spread, that debates would spark online about bias, control, and authority. But for him, the lesson was simpler. Leaving behind a toxic place is not a loss. It's a step toward peace, And as the truck carried him toward that peace, he wanted others to remember one thing. Neighbors should be lifelines, not obstacles. And if you believe stories like Calvin's need to be told, don't forget to subscribe, because these stories aren't just entertainment. They're lessons in what it means to stand firm, find peace, and finally close the door on those who tried to hold you back.